Do you think money makes a man greater than another? Look me in the eye and tell me. Because every time you laugh at someone who works with their hands, every time you mock the man who sweeps your floors, you're not proving your worth. You're proving your emptiness. The voice trembled with intensity, carrying across the lavish hall filled with polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and hundreds of sharp-dressed guests. For a moment, the music stopped. The laughter died. Every eye in the room turned toward the speaker. It had started like any other night, one of those grand charity galas where fortunes are flaunted under the disguise of generosity. Men in tuxedos swirled their wine glasses, women in gowns compared jewelry, and waiters moved silently like shadows. Yet among the gleam of silver trays and flowing champagne, one man did not fit, the janitor. Old, weary, and clothed in a faded uniform, he quietly pushed his mop across the spotless marble. The billionaire host, Richard Donovan, had seen him, and Richard was never one to pass on an opportunity to remind the world of his place at the top of it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard's booming voice cut through the chatter, drawing amused smirks from his circle of admirers. He raised a glass of champagne and pointed toward the janitor with deliberate cruelty. "There is your real contribution tonight, not the checks, not the speeches, but this man, mopping up after us. Look at him. Do you know how little he makes? Do you know he'll never sit at this table? And yet, here he is, scrubbing the dirt from our shoes as though it's his destiny." A wave of laughter rippled across the hall. Some chuckled awkwardly, not daring to oppose the billionaire's mockery. Others laughed freely, pointing, whispering, shaking their heads. The janitor froze, his hands tightening around the mop handle, his gaze sinking toward the floor. His name was Samuel. To most, he was invisible. Tonight, he was a target. But what no one expected was the sound of a chair scraping against the marble. From the far end of the table, a young man rose. His posture was firm, his expression unreadable. He was Richard Donovan's son, Michael. "Father," Michael said quietly at first, but the tension in his tone sliced the silence sharper than any shout. "Stop!" Richard's smirk faltered. He laughed, as though trying to brush away his son's words. "Stop? Oh, come on, boy. Don't tell me you're defending the janitor. We're among friends here." Michael stepped forward, each word heavy, deliberate. "Friends don't laugh at someone who's working harder than they ever will. Friends don't humiliate a man just because he wears a uniform. You may be the richest man in this room, but tonight, you've made yourself the poorest." The air shifted. Murmurs stirred across the tables. Richard's jaw tightened, but Michael wasn't finished. He turned, addressing not just his father, but everyone. "Do you know who Samuel is? None of you do, because you've never bothered to ask. You see a janitor. I see the man who works through the night so your shoes don't stick to this floor. I see a man who raised 3 children while earning less than what some of you tip for wine. And I see someone who, without recognition or applause, makes this place bearable for you. And you dare laugh?" Michael's voice cracked with emotion, and for the first time Samuel raised his head. Their eyes met, one weary, one burning with conviction. Richard chuckled nervously, masking the unease building inside him. "Son, you're making a spectacle. Don't be dramatic. It was a joke." Michael shook his head. "No, father, a joke is when people laugh together. What you did was strip a man's dignity to get a reaction. That's not humor, that's cruelty." The silence in the room grew suffocating. Guests exchanged glances, shifting in their seats. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others avoided Samuel altogether. Samuel, voice low but steady, finally spoke. "It's all right, young man. I've heard worse in my life." Michael stepped closer to him. "It's not all right, and it shouldn't have to be, because every person in this room owes more to people like you than they'll ever admit." For the first time in years, Samuel felt someone stand beside him. Not as a shadow, not as a servant, but as a human being worth defending. Richard, feeling his pride slip, forced a laugh. My son has always had a bleeding heart. He thinks kindness is currency. But tell me, Michael, does kindness buy you a house? Does it buy you power? Michael stared at his father, his words sharp but calm. Maybe not, but it buys you respect. And when the money fades, and it always does, respect is all that remains. Gasps whispered across the room. The tension was unbearable. The billionaire had insulted the janitor, but his own son had stood against him, publicly, fearlessly. Samuel lowered his eyes again, his throat tight, but this time for another reason. Not shame, not humiliation, gratitude. And though the night was far from over, the balance of power in that gilded hall had already begun to shift. The hall remained frozen, as though even the chandeliers had stopped shimmering. All eyes darted between Richard Donovan, the billionaire host, and his son Michael, who had dared to shatter the illusion of untouchable wealth with nothing more than truth. Samuel stood awkwardly, clutching his mop like a shield, his body screaming to disappear, but his heart unwillingly tethered to the words Michael had spoken. "Sit down, Michael," Richard said, voice sharp now, his authority cracking. "This is not the place." Michael shook his head. "It's exactly the place. Because if no one ever stands up here in front of these people, then nothing changes." "Changes?" Richard scoffed, a bitter laugh spilling out. "My son wants to be a revolutionary now? You live off my fortune, boy. You've never worked a day like that, man. Don't pretend you understand struggle." Michael's eyes glistened, but his voice stayed steady. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't know Samuel's struggle, but I know what respect looks like. I know that dignity isn't measured in bank accounts. And I know that humiliating a man who earns his bread with sweat is the lowest kind of wealth." A murmur ran across the crowd, some nodding quietly, others whispering about the spectacle unraveling before them. One woman leaned toward her husband and whispered, "He's right. My father was a mechanic. People mocked him too." The husband only nodded, shifting uncomfortably. Richard slammed his glass on the table. "Enough. This is my house, my event, my name on every wall here. Don't lecture me about respect. Respect is earned, Michael, not handed to someone pushing a mop." The words landed like stones. But before Michael could speak, Samuel's low voice broke the silence. "Sir," Samuel said, his voice trembling but carrying an undeniable weight, "if respect is earned, then I've been earning it for 40 years. The guests fell silent again. Samuel straightened his back, setting the mop aside. His hands, rough and calloused, clenched at his sides. "I started working when I was 15. My father died in a factory accident, and my mother had nothing. I cleaned floors, carried boxes, patched up shoes, whatever it took to keep food on the table. I've mopped up hospitals where sick children cried through the night. I've polished schools where kids dreamed of a future I couldn't afford for my own. And every floor I've scrubbed, I've earned. Not because people like you said so, because I did it with honesty." The hall went still. No one laughed now. Samuel's voice shook, but every syllable rang like iron against glass. Michael stepped closer, his chest tight with admiration. "That's what I've been trying to tell you, Father. Respect isn't about wealth. It's about sacrifice." Richard leaned back, visibly unsettled. His eyes darted across the crowd, realizing that the tide of judgment was shifting. Faces no longer reflected amusement. They reflected shame. Samuel lowered his gaze again, whispering almost to himself, "I didn't come here to be noticed. I came here to do my job, but I won't let my children watch me be treated like less than a man." Something inside Michael broke. He thought of his own life, college funded by his father, opportunities handed to him like wrapped gifts. And yet here was a man who had built everything from the dirt under his fingernails. "Samuel," Michael said softly, "your children must be proud, because tonight I am." Gasps fluttered through the room, but none louder than the quiet sob Samuel stifled in his throat. His lips trembled, his eyes burning as he quickly wiped them on his sleeve. Embarrassed, Richard's voice rose again, desperate now, trying to regain control. Proud? Of what? Of a man who will never escape poverty? Michael, stop romanticizing failure. He chose this life. That was when Samuel's head snapped up, fire sparking in his tired eyes. Chose, his voice thundered now, resonant in its pain. Do you think I chose to watch my wife die because I couldn't afford the medicine? Do you think I chose to sell my wedding ring to pay for my daughter's school books? Do you think I chose to spend my nights scrubbing the spit of men who never even learned my name? I didn't choose poverty. I chose survival. And that survival has more dignity than your arrogance ever will. The words cut like a blade. The hall erupted in whispers, some guests lowering their heads in guilt, others blinking back unexpected tears. Michael looked at his father, his voice calm but devastating. Do you hear him now, Father? Do you still think wealth makes you greater? Because the only man who looks great tonight is the one you tried to humiliate. For the first time, Richard was speechless. His lips parted, but no words came. His hand shook slightly as he reached for his glass, trying to mask the storm brewing within him. He had spent a lifetime building an empire, commanding fear and envy. But in one night, his son and a janitor had stripped away the illusion, leaving him bare in front of everyone he once dominated. Samuel turned to leave, but Michael stopped him with a gentle hand on his shoulder. Stay. You deserve to be here more than any of us. Samuel hesitated, his heart pounding. All his life, he had been the shadow in the corner, the silent worker slipping through unnoticed. And now, for the first time, the spotlight wasn't a weapon against him. It was a light of recognition. The room held its breath. The tension had cracked open something raw and undeniable, and though the night wasn't over, everyone knew they were witnessing more than a family quarrel. They were witnessing a battle of values, a test of what it truly means to be worthy of respect. And as Samuel slowly sat down in an empty chair at the end of the table, something shifted, not just in the room, but in the lives of everyone watching. Because they all felt it. A reckoning was only beginning. The hall felt like it was holding its breath. The glitter of chandeliers now nothing more than silent witnesses to a battle no one had expected. Samuel, the janitor who had spent his life unseen, now sat at the table where billionaires dined. Michael stood beside him, his hand still resting firmly on Samuel's shoulder. Richard Donovan, the billionaire host, the man who had thought himself untouchable, looked smaller than he ever had in his own home. But Richard wasn't finished. Pride is a dangerous thing. It claws, it resists, it refuses to let go. His jaw clenched, his voice dripping with scorn as he tried one last time to salvage his image. You think this proves something, Michael? You think standing up for this man makes you noble? It makes you weak. Sympathy doesn't build empires. Discipline does. Hardness does. You don't inherit my world by crying for janitors. The words echoed, but they no longer carried the weight they once did. The guests shifted uncomfortably. They weren't nodding anymore. They weren't laughing. They were ashamed. Michael turned slowly to his father, his eyes steady, unwavering. I don't want to inherit your world, Father. Not if it means stepping on men like Samuel to climb higher. If kindness is weakness, then I'll be weak forever. Because kindness is what makes us human. The silence was deafening. And then, a voice broke it. Unexpected, trembling, yet commanding. Mr. Donovan. Samuel's voice filled the hall, no longer a whisper in the corners. His chest rose and fell as he stood, his eyes locked on Richard's. You've mocked me tonight. But let me tell you something no one in this room has heard before. Once I dreamed of being an engineer. I used to stay up late drawing designs, building things from scrap. But life doesn't always bend to dreams. My mother got sick, and I put those dreams away to take care of her. I scrubbed floors instead of building bridges. And maybe I'll never see my name on a skyscraper, but every day I built something else. I built resilience. I built character. I built a family that still believes in me. And no amount of money can buy that. The room quivered under the weight of his words. A woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. A man clenched his jaw, recalling his own father who had worked double shifts at a factory. The truth was undeniable. Michael spoke again, his voice gentler now, carrying the lesson like a torch. Father, maybe you've built an empire, but Samuel has built a life. And a life worth respecting is far greater than walls of glass and steel. Richard's hand trembled as he gripped the edge of the table. For the first time, cracks appeared in his armor. His gaze fell, not on the crowd, not on Michael, but on Samuel. In those eyes he saw something he had never dared acknowledge, the mirror of his own beginnings. Before the money, before the empire, Richard had been the son of a tailor. A boy who watched his father stitch suits late into the night just to keep the family fed. For a moment, Richard saw himself in Samuel, and it terrified him. His voice broke, barely audible. I forgot. Michael tilted his head. Forgot what? Richard swallowed hard, his pride fighting, collapsing. Forgot where I came from. The words rippled through the hall like a confession at an altar. Suddenly, the room was not filled with billionaires and servants. It was filled with people, each carrying a story, a sacrifice, a dream buried beneath duty. Samuel's eyes softened. He didn't smile, but his voice carried no anger. It's easy to forget, sir. Harder to remember, but tonight, maybe you've started. Richard lowered himself into his chair, the weight of decades pressing down on him. The hall was silent still, but no longer tense. It was reverent. Michael turned toward the guests, his voice lifting, steady and clear. Tonight wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about power. It was about respect. Remember Samuel when you walk past the man sweeping your office. Remember him when you hand your car keys to the valet, or when the waitress sets your plate down. Remember him, because every person who serves you is fighting a battle you may never see, and one act of kindness can mean more than all the money in your bank account. The hall erupted, not in laughter, not in whispers, but in applause, real, heartfelt applause. For Samuel, for dignity, for the reminder that humanity is what binds us all. Samuel blinked rapidly, his chest tight as tears welled in his eyes. For once, those tears weren't from exhaustion. They were from recognition. For a man who had lived invisible, tonight he had been seen. Richard sat silently, staring into his glass, a storm of reflection in his eyes. And Michael stood tall beside Samuel, his voice carrying one final truth. You don't measure a man by the size of his fortune. You measure him by the size of his heart. The applause grew louder, echoing into the night, a sound Samuel would carry with him for the rest of his days. And as the evening drew to a close, one powerful lesson lingered in the minds of every guest. In daily life, we rush past janitors, cashiers, bus drivers, the people who hold our world together quietly. We may not know their stories, but they exist. Stories of sacrifice, of endurance, of silent battles. And the way we treat them says more about us than about them. So the next time you see someone overlooked, remember Samuel. And choose respect. Because true greatness is not in how high you rise, but in how deeply you care for those the world overlooks. And with that, dear friends, if this story moved you, if it opened your heart even a little, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Black Saga, where we bring you stories that remind you of the strength, kindness, and dignity within us all. Drop a comment below, like this video if it touched you, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. Because stories like Samuel's deserve to be remembered.